My name is Van Sheen. You're listening to the 1002nd Album Podcast, and my album of choice is Soup by Blind Melon.
Hi, I'm Jeff Stephen, and you're listening to the 1002nd Album Podcast. I spent 10 years going through the 1001 albums you must hear before you die, and now I'm asking people that are important to me all about the albums that are important to them. Enjoy! This is the 1002nd Album Podcast. I'm Jeff Stephen, and I'm particularly excited for today's episode for one of my core beliefs is that the top musicians are humble, gracious, and can really play a bit of everything, and all of the above applies to my guest today. In fact, the most recent gig I saw him perform at was at a children's sing-along show at a story time, and so he really can do a bit of everything. Please welcome Van Sheen.
Thank you so much for that.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you for coming today. And the album of choice today is Blind Melon Soup. And my first question would be, Van and Blind Melon, where did it all begin?
Okay, well, with Blind Melon, I think for just about everybody, it starts at No Rain, the B Girl, the video. Personally, I remember my mom pointing out, oh my goodness, the B girl looks like your cousin Jill, and the singer in the scenes where he's in the sunflowers, that looks like her brother Brett. And there was this kind of a personal hook that kind of made me pay attention to it. I bought the tape, so I know you and I are the same age, and so my music collection starts with cassette tapes. I got that tape and was an album that I would listen to all the way through. So I was really quick on hearing the rest of what the band sounded like, not just No Rain, which I do love that song, but they have so much more to offer. I think at the time, I guess the album's 92, and then when I was looking into this album, I realized, sometimes things were delayed by up to a year of when we got it in Canada and was right into it. So in 92, I was 12, 93, 13. I was very much into Pearl Jam and Nirvana, Rage, Stone Temple Pilots, stuff that was pretty hard hitting. And I don't know, there was like a levity and a happiness in Blind Melon's music, which appealed to me. And that was a tape that I had a little Sony boombox with headphones in my room. I would listen to it at night. I would listen to it on my Walkman, and the yellow Sony Walkman that everyone had, mowing the lawn. Yeah, and then of course I liked the video whenever I would see it on Much Music, which was a passion. And VHS set up with a blank tape, making video mixtapes, hit and record, and trying to catch all your favorite stuff. And in hindsight, there was just such a wealth of music coming out at that time. I've never given up the 90s music. I've definitely branched out and listened to current things, but I've never denied my affection for the 90s music.
And nor should you either.
Right? Yeah. So I guess this was before I started playing guitar, and I just really loved that first album.
Yeah.
So I think Blind Melon and I start with the first album.
Love it. And yeah, and I can totally picture that yellow sport Sony Walkman. That was a staple in all of our childhoods for sure.
Absolutely.
I guess what's too bad with Blind Melon is that they did have such a tragically small catalog, where there was only two of the albums came out during Shannon Hoon's lifetime, and then the one Nico was released posthumously, and and they're again all terrific ones. And my friend Brian mentioned Nico would be his 1002nd. If I was a guest on the show, I might pick that first one that you had on cassette because it's just magnificent. And you ended up going with Soup, which is terrific as well. And what is it about Soup that stands out for you?
Okay, well, here's one of those things where it's like I love all three albums so much. The can't see the forest for the trees. Like I'm right in the trees up a tree. I mean, I love all three hugely. And I think Nico, when it came out, reminded me how much I love Blind Melon. There is the intimacy of hearing just Shannon and an acoustic guitar and this kind of deeper look into the band. I think the reason why I chose Soup is it sounds like they have more money, more freedom to do whatever they want with a studio album, and they were perhaps more courageous to explore various music styles, various instruments. So I think it kind of, as a singular album, it shows the most of what they can do. I mean, I think it's undeniable they did have more money for it because of the success of No Rain. The other thing is that they would have been touring for 2 or 3 years and playing all the time. So they're absolutely at the height of their powers. I feel like everything that I love about the first album is there and then some on Soup. I made a little list of the instruments, and this is part of what makes it my fave. So there's electric guitar and acoustic guitar, there's electric bass and upright bass, coarse drums, and then we have mandolin, banjo, lap steel, a cello, there's flute, there's Hammond B3 organ, there's horns, there's congas, tambourine, shaker, clave, kazoo makes it in there, a harmonica, and accordion. And so compared to some of those other 90s bands that I mentioned, it's so diverse. I can't remember. I've listened to a number of episodes of this podcast now, and you made a little quote of reluctant to listening to anything that wasn't just bass guitar and drums. And
Guilty.
right. And then so I think this was a wonderful introduction to you can have all these instruments as part of the alternative rock fabric. It's hard to compare them to other bands, but I think Led Zeppelin would be a touchstone there. They're like the prototype of that, of like you incorporating acoustic guitar into like epic rock songs. And I just found that all so pleasing. I think I checked it out. It was like the running length of all three albums comes in under 2.5 hours. And then like the commonly traded B-sides and rarities are like, another maybe 30 minutes. So they benefit maybe from we didn't hear them go too far in any direction and lose the fans. It's kind of kept it concise, but even within that, there is so much variety and diversity.
And this one, as you mentioned, they're tough to categorize, because if the label had been looking for No Rain Part 2, that's definitely not what arrived on Soup here. How it's just, like you said, it's pushing all these boundaries. It sounds like they had more time, more freedom, able to explore these different paths. And I think a lot of that has to do with the musicians as well. And so the guys in the band. So we've got Glenn Graham on the drums, Brad Smith on the bass, Chris Thorne on guitar, and Roger Stevens as well. What is it about those four playing together that just works for Blind Melon?
Well, the together part is one thing. I find that they interlock and weave together so beautifully amongst the bass and the guitars. They really do the weaving thing where their lines are in and out of each other, and at times you lose track of when is it Rogers and when is it Christopher. I think they do list Christopher as rhythm guitar and Rogers as lead guitar, but there's times where those roles are flipped as well. Glenn Graham's drumming stands out to me because of the incorporation of swing and jazz sounds and Latin even, where again, when compared to the context of the 90s stuff that was coming out, even though alternative is such a broad category, there's less of that. Like you can hear the John Bonham in there, but then I hear Allman Brothers as well in like swinging rhythms. I can hear the influence of like Cream, Ginger Baker on him, and like the Jimi Hendrix Experience. I can hear Mitch Mitchell in there, which somebody who's bringing the jazz vocabulary to the rock form. He plays an interesting drum kit, which it has, when you hear double kick, you think of metal and like these blast beats. But he has like one large kick drum and one small kick drum, which is, I don't know anyone else who's done that. And I think he uses them individually to get different sounds. So he's got like a very interesting style on his own. And then it seems to be there's kind of two camps of drummers. There's the ones that can do the percussion thing, and there's ones that are like, do not hand me a percussion instrument. I'm a kit drummer. But he very much brings in percussion stuff. He brings in clave, shaker, tambo. In the song Walk, there is like nothing but kick drum for 3/4 of the song, and then drums enter. And so I find him to be a super interesting player. With Brad Smith, the bass player, uses the entire neck, is very a melodic approach to his bass lines. Again, weaving in with what's going on with the guitars. The song Toes Across the Floor, his part is like in the forefront and he's playing harmonics. So he's playing some techniques that we don't get to hear with every band. He also has the ability to just step right over to upright bass, which brings this, diversity and again, not every rock bass player can do that. In kind of doing a little bit of preliminary research for this, I found out that he's the one playing flute on Toes Across the Floor and Car Seat. And then the one thing I do remember from Blind Melon has I had it on VHS, a video called Letters from a Porcupine. There's a bit where they're on Much Music, which is intimate and interactive.
Yeah.
And Shannon points over to Brad and Shannon doesn't sing, and Brad sings the lead to this little song called No Business, which is one of those rarities. And his voice sounds unbelievably like Shannon. So I believe that it is Shannon doing his own backing vocals throughout the album, but live, Brad brought that. And like what a challenging voice to match and to be there. I know around campfires over the years, Blind Melon is very hard to cover because of Shannon's like high register.
Yes.
But they just happen to have this phenomenal bass player that could do that. Like they are so wealthy with musicianship in that band. Rogers Stevens, who nowadays is a practicing lawyer. You can hear the classic rock in his playing. If it's a kind of an overdriven guitar solo, it's often Rogers. I love when him and Christopher are both playing single note lines at the same time. And he plays the Hammond organ on the album. So each player bringing in alternate instrument and at a level that can make it to the album, like really, really cool. And I believe those three, Glenn, Brad, and Rogers, are all from Mississippi. So South is the southern states have such a history and reputation for passion about music, and at a time when a lot of the bands seemed to be coming from Seattle, they really didn't. Shannon's from Lafayette, Indiana, and Christopher is from Pennsylvania. And then Christopher's perhaps the one that I have identified now most of like kind of my hero. His ability to play in open tunings, to switch to lap steel, which is something that I took on for myself. He plays banjo on Skinned and mandolin on Change and Walk. He brings like these folk elements, and then when he is on electric guitar, it is like unbridled rock. He's playing huge fuzz pedal tones, and there's a couple songs that feature the electronic effect, the EBow, which is like really, really dramatic. In the song Wilt, you can hear his EBow work really, really clearly. He is the one that wrote the song Soup, which did not make it to the album Soup. It's like this incredible piece, and it's hard to understand how it didn't make the album. So individually, like really strong musicians, and then together, you can hear how much time they've spent playing together. There's a song on the first album called Sleepy House, and that whole song is about the process of them renting a house, living in it, and like waking up, making music all day and all night, and just like immersing. And the tightness and intricacy of what they can do together, I think, comes from that.
Nice. And that is the ultimate, when individually it's great, but then when you have that synergy of one and one and one and one ends up equaling five or more, just where they accomplish so much as the unit as well, which is incredible.
There's a bit in that Letters from a Porcupine video where one of them says, like everyone put in their 2 cents and then you got $10,
I like that.
which is pretty great.
And then you alluded to him in the as you're saying there was Shannon Hoon, where he really did have a voice that sounded unlike anything else.
I absolutely agree. Shannon's voice is unique, is what is probably the easiest word you could use, but so full of feeling. For me, I'm guilty of sometimes not paying close attention to lyrics. I mean, of course, there are important lyrics to me that I can really appreciate. I think it's the feeling of his singing which really connected to me deeply as a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, it's so raw and full of feeling, and also times where he's just singing oohs and ahs, like just using his voice as an instrument without necessarily the lyrics. There's a lot to say here about his voice. He has that raspiness to his voice. So he has a high register thing going on, and he has the ability to kind of scream without sounding shrill, and then or sing softly and just having this beautiful tone. The high register and rasp thing, I think, is maybe shared by Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, but Shannon's voice is even higher in range. When trying to describe his voice, I agree with often what people go to, and they compare it to Janis Joplin. Really, really raspy, raw, and full of feeling, like at all times. I also think in little bits that I saw him speaking, he just seemed really fun and nice. He seemed like someone like I would love to know that person and hang out with them. And then that kind of contrasts with his lyrical content of things being dark and lots of lyrics of suffering, so drug addiction and mental health. I think something that I took from that from a young age was I'm going to avoid hard drugs at all costs because this person is telling me what could happen. And then, of course, died, right, at the age of 28, and kind of a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy on that one. If someone was like, show me right now what's so impressive about his voice, I would point to the song on Soup, The Duke, which at the 2 minute and 5 second mark, he sustains a screaming lyric for 25 seconds. He sings, I'm livid. And it's, I'm livid. And just goes and goes and goes. And the band starts boiling underneath him. It's goosebumps for me, like almost every time. I just, I love it.
Yeah.
And then to show the other side of his voice would be something like Mouthful of Cavities, where it's soft. It even starts out with like whispering, and then is the only Blind Melon song where there's an external voice. There's a female vocalist named Jenna Krause, and they work together unbelievably well on that one. Oh, the other thing was that previous to Blind Melon, I was a huge Guns N' Roses fan. Well known that Shannon and Axl both came from Lafayette, Indiana, and that Shannon sings on Don't Cry. He's not only singing, but you see him in the video. And it was this neat when things come full circle, and you're like, oh my God, I know his voice from before I even knew who he was. And yeah, he sings those beautiful upper harmony parts on Don't Cry, which was a song that like I went to public school dances, and that has its own like deep sentimental value to me. Yeah. Oh, Shannon, never get tired of it.
No, no, for sure. And yet, and I'm with you where I don't often pay attention to lyrics, but I remember there was one from the first album on Paper Scratcher where he says, "My mind is a mind that I have come to know." And in this case, like you said, where it's very raw here, it's full of feeling, and it feels like we were given these glimpses into all the challenges he was going through with addiction and mental health, unlike anything I would have heard at the time. Are there individual moments you find that stand out on Soup?
Yeah, this was hard for me because I think I've had so much time for it to grow on me that it's kind of cover to cover, just love. But when in the context of like trying to encourage someone to listen to it after listening to 1001 albums, like what are some standout moments? So track wise, I would say I would skip them straight to Mouthful Cavities, Galaxy, and Toes Across the Floor to really get a sense of what they could do, especially if someone had only known No Rain. I think those really represent the versatility of the band. And then I think for me personally, after this much time, the songs, The Duke, which was the one that I mentioned with the big long scream, St. Andrew's Ball, New Life, and Vernie. So if I could, I'll kind of talk about each of them. So the Duke has really great psychedelic sounding effects with reverse delay and watery underwater sounds, which is really cool. Like apparently the song is about a decorated surfer who died while surfing. And so there's this neat tone painting thing where the sounds are also representing the content of the song. And then this gradual building of intensity throughout the song. It's in a nutshell. There's a brilliant guitar solo in there. There's the interplay where the band is building things together, and then there's that incredible vocal when he sings "I'm Livid."
At
And then,
205.
yeah, that's right. You got it. And then for St. Andrew's Ball, it has quite it morphs over the course of the song. This is a song that apparently when on tour they witnessed somebody jump off a building and take their life. So it's Shannon's letter like or to them and also explaining how he felt. And so there's a beautiful cello solo in there, which is like always like really emotionally effective to me. Again, the building of intensity where everyone working together. It's got this part where everything starts to get chaotic and stack on each other and build up in tempo and intensity until it's all like just unraveling, and then it breaks and stops, and then there's this like minor progression. And when you know what the song's about, it like that to me represents the part of the fall, and then you get this wonderful outro describing you should have been in my shoes yesterday and haven't seen what I saw kind of thing. New Life, the standout track is, I mean, musically it's very, very beautiful, but the story on that one is really tragic. I mean, he is singing very literally on throughout the album. There's lots of lyrics that have pretty opaque meaning. Like I'm not really sure what he's getting at, but at least it conjures images. But on this one, he's like singing very literally, and he's talking about finding out that his longtime girlfriend is pregnant and they're gonna have a baby, and he's kind of hoping it'll bring some change in his life. And so there's the lyric, because now she's telling me she'll have my baby, and a father figure I'm going to be. When I look into the eyes of my new baby, will it bring new life into me? Oh, please. And it is just heartbreaking to know that it did not. He relapsed. There's a recent documentary that kind of talks about the end of his life. He was using cocaine intravenously, and his daughter Nico was born on July 11th, 95, and Shannon died on October 21st, 95. So she was 4 months old. And that just gives the whole thing so much weight to me. So that's a real standout track as well. And then the last one that I had there was Vernie. And Vernie is a playful description of how much he loves his grandmother. I mean, who writes about that? There's these neat little quotes of like pickles in the fridge haven't been opened since 1983, and a collection of glass chickens and all these images. but it is musically really, really beautiful and something I can listen to over and over again. It's a great example of Brad's melodic approach to his bass lines. And then there is a part where there's a poem being recited and kind of over a phone or a megaphone. And that poem is what Shannon had tattooed on his arm. And it was a poem written by his grandma. Yeah, that one always stands out to me too. Over time, I just musically, how it sounds, just love it.
Yeah. Nice. And the vocal harmonies in that one were stunning as well.
Oh
Yeah.
man, yeah, absolutely. The lyric, I had a couple little lyric ones that I jotted down, kind of examples of like kind of that would let someone know kind of what he was about. So when he says, so now I'll take a little glue, I'll put together a new glittered room for you, so I can start sitting so pretty instead of sitting here not seeing clear, sitting here not fitting here. I get a lot of imagery from that, from those lyrics. The lyric in the song Walk, when he sings, I find myself singing the same songs every day, ones that make me feel good when things behind the smiles ain't okay. And so it's just so honest, and I've always loved that. Um, uh, oh, in Vernie, yeah, here it is, the just all these little tiny images where he says, maybe it's the snuff under your lip, or maybe caramel cake covered Christmas. Oh, flower, you are to my land. No, I cannot deny the beauty. If I had a heart, I would want it to be like Vernie's. Oh, what a heart that she has. And I just get such vivid images
Yeah.
from that. So I mean, it's the lyric ones are tough. I think actually there are some more incredible lyric bits that I could take from the first album, but again, there's some yeah, there's no. It's I think part of it is because that there's just so much feeling. You almost have to hear it how it is sung to get the impact.
And the I guess there's no shortage of reasons why, but if you had to consolidate into one answer, why would this be the 1,000 second album that one must hear?
Yeah, the interplay between the musicians, the versatility, like there's rock moments, there's funky moments, there's jazz moments, there's folk elements. It's it's a really great soup of stuff put
Yeah.
together, I guess, for lack of a better term.
So it's
Uh,
not just a clever name, I guess.
right? And then and then there's things that make it interesting as an album as well, is it had really great packaging. It was made to look like this diner, and it had producer Andy Wallace eating a bowl of alphabet soup. It has a cool hidden track that you have to rewind from the first track. I did make a little thing about Andy Wallace. He produced and engineered the album, and he was coming from stuff like Slayer and Run DMC, and mixing Rage's first album, and then and Jeff Buckley, Faith No More, like these, and then he does Soup. So the rocking moments are really, really rocking. It's sonically very impactful. I think anyone would benefit from listening to it. It's just hard for me to describe because it's the overall, I think it is a personal connection, but because I love it so much, I would want anyone to go check that out and see if it resonates with them.
For sure. And it's yeah, I love how it's so unconventional where it like this even within the you mentioned like with the drummer how he'd go from jazz to Latin to rock and even within the same song the verse and chorus might be dramatically different just it would take us on all these paths and yeah and we were richer for it as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think I've seen too, like critically, even though it wasn't received incredibly well at the time, it's one of those like 25 years later or wherever we're at now, it really is regarded by peers and by like alternative rock fans in general. The fact that Blind Melon wasn't on that 1001 list at all was surprising to me. And then to be honest, I think any one of the three could make that list for different reasons. But if I had to pick the one, I'd pick Soup.
Nice. And I'm glad, even if the original list editors had an oversight with Blind Melon, I'm pleased it's at least being rectified on the 1,000 second list at least. So that's good.
I know, I love it. Which is such a great idea for a podcast, by the way. I
Oh,
when you said the name, I wasn't sure what it was a reference to, and then I went to the website and saw the 1,000 albums, and then listened to one of the episodes. And so you over 10 years, did you like listen to all of them?
yeah, my rule was I had to listen to
Oh,
each of them at least twice. And so I started,
wow.
yeah, in 2011, went right through till 2021. And yeah, it was it was a journey for sure, where like there were ones that I knew already, ones I knew the artist but wasn't familiar with the album, and ones that were entirely brand new. And I still felt a bit like a musical tourist, because even after a couple listens, you haven't really fully immersed, but it was definitely and it was a good reminder of, even though it was 1,001 albums, it's still just scratching the surface of all the good stuff that's out there. So a good reminder that I even with that, I still know so little about what's out there, which is thankfully where you folks come in, where you're now keeping me up to date on all the other things I should be listening to as well.
Yeah, well, looking at those episodes, the fact that there's that many lists or that many awesome albums that didn't make the list really speaks to how much incredible music there is out there to explore and to experience.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And a huge thank you to you, Van, today for coming. And I guess until the next time,
Thank you so much.
take care.
Bye.
This has been the 1,000 Second Album Podcast. Thanks for sharing some of your time, energy, and attention with us today. Take care.